Вишнупадая Кришна Прештая Бутале Шримати Бхактивиданта Свамини Тинамини Намасте Сарасвати Деви Гауравани Прачарини Нирвишеши Шуньявади Пашчатядеши Тарине Ванчакалпатарубясча Крипа Синдубьевача Патитанам Паванебьо Вайшнавебьо Намо Намаха Шри Кришна Чайтанья Прабхунитананда Шьядвайта Гададхара Шивасади Гаура Бхактавринда Харе Кришна, Кришна Кришна, Харе Харе, Харе Рама, Рама Рама, Харе Харе. Пурначандра Госвами, тогда еще Пурначандра Прабху, приехал в Россию и практически стал жить в России после событий 1998 года. В российском ИСККОН 1998 год был определенной вехой, потому что в этот год один из лидеров ИСККОН, гуру для практически всех первых преданных, всего поколения первых преданных в России, Харикеша с вами Махарадж ушел из ИСККОН по той или иной причине. До этого Пурначандра Махарадж приезжал в Россию, на Украину, проповедовал здесь, и даже, если я не ошибаюсь, провел курс Бхакти-шастра. Но после этих событий он приехал сюда уже, в общем, насовсем. И это, конечно, само по себе очень показательно, потому что, как правило, люди приезжают туда, где есть успех. Он приехал в тот момент, когда российская ятра была почти уничтожена, когда у многих преданных были сомнения, когда многие зашатались в своей вере. И что он стал делать? Он стал делать то, что он делал, в общем-то, на протяжении многих лет уже до этого, и в Англии, в Бхактивиданта Мэннер, и во Вриндаване, когда он преподавал Бхакти-шастры. Он стал заниматься систематическим обучением. Сам он человек в высшей степени знающий, и его книга Гитамрита, на мой взгляд, является одним из шедевров. Ему удалось в результате своего преподавания Бхагавад-гиты многолетнего свести воедино комментарии ачарьев и превратить эти комментарии в живой диалог, наполнить тот диалог, который состоялся на битве Курукшетра, внутренним диалогом, который раскрывают ачарьи. И он сделал это с необычайным вкусом и тактом. Это из числа книг, написанных после ухода Шрилы Прабхупады, конечно же, на мой взгляд, одно из самых лучших произведений, особенно в том, что касается философии. Последователи Шрилы Прабхупады написали много очень трогательных и глубоких книг, воспоминаний о нем, но из философских работ эта книга Пурначандры Махараджа, пожалуй, одна из самых лучших. Он приехал в Россию, я помню, в 1999 году в Сухарево, оставшемся без почти что руководства, в очень сложных финансовых обстоятельствах. Мы преподавали очередной курс Бхакти-шастра. И с тех пор, с 1999 года, прошло уже 21 год с этих пор, я очень хорошо помню одну вещь, как Пурначандра Махарадж повторял мантру. Он зажигал свечу или светильник, садился перед этим светильником и очень-очень тщательно, внимательно, в полном одиночестве, не отвлекаясь ни на что другое, повторял Святое Имя. Это была его ежедневная практика, на которой, собственно, основывалось все. После этого курса Бхакти-шастр, когда бок о бок в соседних комнатах мы прожили 3 летних месяца, мы, наверное, никогда так близко не общались и не были так рядом чисто физически друг с другом, но я всегда с огромным почтением слушал то, что он говорил, приходил на его семинары. Особенно мне запомнился семинар, который он давал на украинском фестивале Бхакти Сангама, посвященный Шриле Прабхупаде, его историям, его не своим собственным воспоминаниям о Шриле Прабхупаде, но историям, почерпнутым из от каких-то других людей, которым он добавлял свойственной ему глубины. Он был очень глубоким человеком, он был очень последовательным человеком. У него был глубочайший вкус к Вриндавану, к вриндаванским лилам Кришны. И его последняя книга, которую он писал на протяжении последних лет жизни, самое лучшее тому свидетельство. У него был огромный вкус к шастрам, к комментариям ачарьев. Это его книга, посвященная лилам Кришны, написана на основе прежде всего Гопала Чампу и других комментариев ачарьев. И он был очень строгим человеком. В этой строгости и даже какой-то внешней неприступности тоже была его последовательность. Это было проявление его внутренней честности. Он не был популистом. От своих учеников он требовал очень, ну, скажем так, очень серьезных поступков. Он нелегко принимал в ученики, он не гнался за какой-то дешевой популярностью. При этом с людьми, с которыми его связывали настоящие связи, он был очень личностным и отдавал им все, что у него было. Мединипати, безусловно, один из таких преданных, который купался в лучах его, ну, скажем так, непростой милости, а не дешевой милости. Есть люди, которые очень легко, с готовностью проливают свое благорасположение на других. Он не относился к числу таких людей, но в этом была его жизненная установка, жизненная кредо. Другим человеком, с которым его, конечно же, связывали очень близкие, очень глубокие отношения, был Шрила Ниранджана Махарадж. Шрила Ниранджана Махарадж тоже относится к числу людей, которые, раз отдав свое сердце другому человеку, никогда не забирают его назад. И в какой-то момент, может быть, не с самого начала проповеди Пурначандры Махараджа на территории бывшего Советского Союза, но в какой-то момент они очень сильно сблизились, и я думаю, что эти отношения играли очень большую роль в жизни Пурначандры Махараджа в последние годы.
Дорогие преданные, пожалуйста, примите мои благословения. Вся слава Шриле Прабхупаде. 13 ноября 2020 года – юбилейная дата. Сегодня 10 лет со дня ухода Его Святейшества Пурначандры Госвами. Мне бы хотелось воспользоваться этой возможностью, чтобы выразить свою искреннюю признательность за его общение, которым он делился со мной, особенно во времена, которые мы провели вместе в служении на Украине и в России. Также, конечно же, я хотел бы выразить свою искреннюю признательность тем преданным, которые продолжают жить, помня наставления, услышанные от него, помня его живой пример, за которым они наблюдали. Продолжать так жить – задача не из легких. Пурначандра Махарадж являл своим примером высокий стандарт сознания Кришны. Других он обучал тому, что практиковал сам. Практиковал глубоко и целеустремленно. Целью Пурначандры Махараджа было достижение Галоки Вриндавана. Он всегда был убежден, что обретет духовную реальность благодаря верному служению своему духовному учителю. Я замечал в нем это качество не только когда он делился со мной сокровенными мыслями, но также и из невысказанных слов, когда он удалялся, чтобы тщательно погрузиться в свой личный баджан. Еще одно качество Пурначандры Махараджа часто вспоминается мне. Он не был заинтересован в том, чтобы идти на компромиссы в сознании Кришны, идти на них ради обретения популярности. Он был суровым, когда это было необходимо. Но с точки зрения вдумчивого человека его резкость можно было понять, даже если Пурначандра Махарадж и не пытался объяснить ее другим. Я ценил в нем это качество. В каком-то смысле я бы сказал, что Пурначандра Махарадж опередил свое время. Мы могли бы многому у него научиться, если бы он все еще физически присутствовал с нами. Но что касается тех, кто живет, храня его в своей памяти, мы можем многому научиться просто из этих воспоминаний. По случаю Дня ухода Пурначандры Махараджа я хочу поблагодарить тех, кто вдохновил меня, попросив поделиться этими несколькими словами о нем. Ваш в служении Шриле Прабхупаде Ниранджана с вами.
Dear devotees, I'd like to say something about His Holiness Purnachandra Maharaj in honor of his upcoming Appearance Day festival. Purnachandra Maharaj is a very, very special devotee. He's one of the persons who preached to me and so-called made me a devotee. In Chaitanya Bhagavat, Vrindavan Das Thakur says, Soche Desi Soche Kuli Apana Saman Janmai Vaishnave Shabare Korotran. That Mahaprabhu had the different devotees appear in different places, and some of those places were Soche Desi, they were pure places like India, and some of them were Asocha, they were places, impious places, and impious families, and he did that to deliver everyone. We shouldn't judge Vaishnavas by their birth, rather we should judge them by what they spoke. And Purnachandra Maharaj is one very special Vaishnav, especially for me also. In 1982, I was traveling in America. After I got out of high school, I was living in the forest and later in a cave. And I was wandering around playing music on the streets and looking for something spiritual. And at one point we came to Austin, Texas. And I knew about the devotees. I was a vegetarian. We used to go to the Hare Krishna temples sometimes for prasadam, and I started going to the Sunday programs there, and I made friends with some of the devotees and started regularly going. And there was one brahmachari there who was very, very effulgent and who was very kind to me, and that was Purnachandra Das Brahmachari. And he was, as I said, very, very kind to me, giving me a lot of time, and he was very, very expert in his preaching, and he was a little different from some of the other devotees in that too. And I never forgot about him, but I didn't see him for another 20 years or something. And one day I was in Mayapur with Bhaktarupa Prabhu, Prabhupada's disciple, who's my dear friend and well-wisher. And Bhaktarupa Prabhu told me, would you like to meet someone? I said, yes. And he took me to meet Purnachandra Maharaj. And I said, Maharaj, I don't know if you remember me, da-da-da. And he actually did remember me. Probably because I used to play spoons and washboard during the during the Sunday program. And he was very kind to me, and immediately I felt some special kind of connection with him. Perhaps partly because he had preached to me, but there was something more than that. There was also a kindred kind of spirit. And later I was fortunate that Maharaj brought a group of devotees to Jagannath Puri and asked me to help take the devotees around. And then I got to have a much more intimate association with him. And I saw, much to my delight, what a very special and unique personality he was. I remember very clearly his katha about Gaur Gadadhar when we went to Tota Gopinath temple. I was very surprised and very impressed that he spoke in such a very deep, esoteric kind of way. And I could see this is not an ordinary person. Later, Fakir Mohan Prabhu, who's one of my Siksha gurus, I heard had spoken with Purnachandra Maharaj, and Purnachandra Maharaj had come to him with kind of a dilemma. And he told him, he said, I don't know what to do. I want to preach, but at the same time I want to speak some higher kinds of things. I want to have more intimate dialogues. And Fakir Prabhu told him, my advice to you is that you don't try to preach to the masses. If you do, you won't be very satisfied. Rather, you should focus on preaching to people who love you and who appreciate you and cultivate them. And he did like that, and he was a very, very extraordinary person. He contributed so much to our society, although in some ways he wasn't so well known. He wasn't a big guru with thousands of disciples. He had, I don't know, a few dozen or so disciples. But those devotees who were with him, he was able to take them very, very deep. I was delighted to see how he was so attracted to different Braj bhajans, which he would sing, bhajans which practically nobody else was doing. He was a very, very special personality, and I strongly hope that his legacy will continue with his disciples. I want to just finish with some comments from Chaitanya Mangal. These are the departing instructions that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu made to the dear devotees of Navadvip just before he took sannyas and left there. And it reminds me something of Purnachandra Maharaj, his mood, and I think these three verses also embody very much the mood of Purnachandra Maharaj, and I want to offer these as a humble offering to Maharaj and the devotees. So Mahaprabhu told the devotees, Tomara Takibe. First thing he said, Tomara Takibe, stay where you're at. Don't go running here and there. If you have your guru, you stay with your guru. You have an instruction, you stay with the service. And he says, Agya Koribi Palana. You follow my command. You obey what I've given you. And Nirantara Dibya Nishi Koribe Kirtan. Day and night, you should do kirtan of the holy names. We want to come close to Purnachandra Maharaj. We want to come close to special Vaishnavas. But how do we come close to them? We come close through the holy name. By chanting the holy name constantly, we'll come close to that devotee. The Mahaprabhu again, he says, Harinama, chant the holy name, Bhakta Seva, serve the devotees, Koribe Stapana, and this way you'll establish my movement. So similarly, in this way, I strongly think we'll be able to keep the memory of Purnachandra Maharaj very strong. If devotees see it's not just a personality cult, or we don't just love this person because he was nice to me, but we love him because of what he stood for. And he stood for the holy name. He stood for Bhakta Seva. And doing that Bhakta Seva will please him. In this way, we'll be able to establish his teachings and be able to continue his preaching and his presence in the world today. And then Mahaprabhu says, Ei dharma kori jaina tari sarvajan. This command is for all of you. And then his final command, he said, Namatsara antara horibe sarvajan. Don't have any envy in your heart. When you deal with other persons, be simple. And shabi sabakar mana koro aradhana. With all your hearts, worship and serve each other. I meet many different Vaishnavas in the course of our research and work of making our Krishna Katamrita magazine and things. Some of them are Babajis, some of them are Gaudiya Math devotees, and I'm always an ISKCON devotee because I'm staying faithful to my Guru Maharaj, Sri Srimad Gaur Govinda Maharaj. But I've marked that when I speak with such devotees, they say, you ISKCON people, you have one very special quality. You have this nishta. You're very fixed in the service of Srila Prabhupada. And they respect that so much. So we want to respect the memory of Purначandra Maharaj. We want to keep that alive. And my humble request to all his dear disciples and followers, you please keep his memory alive with dignity by doing these things, by keeping the holy name in the center, by chanting together constantly, by having Krishna Katha, by serving the devotees, and by becoming free from envy, and with all our hearts serving and worshiping each other.
I was thinking of Srila Purначandra Goswami, and I was thinking of his unique contribution. And if I can summarize in this sutra, so I'm going to say a few words that I think exemplify him. And it comes from my own realization of preaching here in America, hopefully in a similar way to intelligent class of people. And that's firmly rooted, branching out. Firmly rooted means to be a Prabhupada Anuga, to do things the way Prabhupada wanted, to follow Prabhupada strictly, and Prabhupada's programs. That's kind of like the orthodox side of Krishna consciousness, conservative side, molding things by the past. And branching out means taking that message and reforming it to communicate to your audience. And that's more like a liberality. So I saw he had that both sides, and I think successful Vaishnavas like Prabhupada had both sides. A traditional side and a more creative side. So I saw that, he was very, very strict, I think also with his disciples about the way Prabhupada did things. But he also communicated Krishna consciousness very deeply from his heart in a very, very spontaneous way, which may have been more liberal in the terms of how he shared Radha and Krishna and the mood of Radha and Krishna, and attracted people by his beautiful bhajans of Radha and Krishna. And I also think in terms of his own spiritual life, I think this is an appropriate way to describe him. He was orthodox. He was very strict. Do things the way Prabhupada did. Of course, everything we do is the way Prabhupada did. But to do it creatively in terms of his own internal life, just like Lord Chaitanya, he came to taste and distribute. So he was following very strictly the way Prabhupada went, really deeply, but also that Braja Bhakti, that mood of giving Vrindavan and the taste for it. And that's a very rare thing. Generally, it's called Purva Samskar. It comes from a previous life to have such deep attraction. And therefore, I can, and I don't say this cheaply, that he was one of the rare godbrothers who is a Rasika Bhakta. A Rasika Bhakta, Rasika means a connoisseur, that was really a connoisseur of Vrindavan and really a connoisseur of Radha and Krishna. So this is the disappearance day. And the disappearance day is it's an opportunity for association. Because in separation, the object that is either outside, not before your sight, goes deeply and deeply in your heart. And we should never think that great Vaishnavas are historical personalities, just like we don't think that Krishna is gone, we don't think that Radha is gone, we don't think that Srila Rupa Goswami is gone, but we still have access to them through their mood and instructions and going deep within the heart and remembering them.
Я не общался с ним очень много, но какие-то вот эпизоды общения меня очень сильно впечатляли, потому что он был, ну, во-первых, очень глубоко погружен в сознание Кришны. Вот он постоянно вдохновлял преданных на воспевание каких-то очень редких баджанов. И он очень глубоко обсуждал философию. И также он верил в то, что только лишь благодаря качеству нашего сознания Кришны мы сможем реально развиваться. То есть это был преданный, совсем не поверхностный. То есть он очень глубоко все делал. И он ценил отношения, и поэтому он вдохновлял преданных развивать вот именно такие общины. Я знаю, вот несколько он в нескольких ятрах вдохновлял на это преданных. В Москве, на Урале однозначно. И, конечно же, наверное, община Баларамовки — это, насколько я знаю, самый яркий пример общины, которая сложилась под влиянием его вдохновения.
And part of what Purначандры Maharaj actually wanted for this project is that they have a Gurukul here. And so just recently most of the boys, it's mainly boys in this community, grew up to be, of a school age. And so just this year, in about July, they started the Gurukul. So they don't have a building yet. And they got the land and they're going to build it. But this is what the Gurukul looks like right now. There's only about 7 or 8 boys here. It's just a boys' Gurukul. And yes, that's what's happening. In this temple, there's just the usual morning program here, just usual temple program. We have Mangalati, japa, greeting, class, and so on, and usual temple services as well. So we cook for the deities, make garlands, cleaning, and this and that. And we also have a garden here, and in this garden we grow a lot of flowers for the deities.
Харе Кришна, примите мои поклоны. В моем сердце искренняя благодарность Пурначандре Махараджи за его благословение открыть, развивать и поддерживать Гурукулу. Это так ценно, что ребята имеют возможность учить академические науки и при этом помнить Кришну. Сейчас я понимаю, насколько это неоценимо, что их день начинается с Гуру-пуджи, а затем они погружаются в историю Шримад Бхагаватам, повторяют и осознают шлоки из Бхагавад-гиты. Они учатся играть на вайшнавских инструментах, петь киртан, прославляющий славу Господа. Спасибо за ваше благословение. Оно действительно дает силы и чувствуется защитой и покровительство, как в организации, так и в учебном процессе. Мы со всеми учителями и учениками склоняемся у ваших стоп и благодарим за возможность получать знания в сознании Кришны. Харе Кришна.
I feel very honored to take this opportunity to glorify His Holiness Purначandra Maharaj, who is a very advanced devotee and one of the leading devotees in ISKCON. He was a member and I think a founder of the Shastrik Advisory Committee and always was consulted for his spiritual wisdom. I consider him very advanced and I hope that he will be glorified today in a very grand way.
I think that today is a very great day and it's a very great occasion that we can stand on the shoulders of great men like Purначandra Maharaj to help us see into the future as to how things should go and what is correct and what is right. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna devotees. My name's Bhakti Chaitanya Swami. I've been asked to say a few words about His Holiness Purначандры Goswami. So let me do that. You know, I knew him for quite a number of years. To be perfectly honest, I cannot remember really how many, but I do know we met while he was a householder. He was married to a lady devotee from the Philippines, where he had been preaching. He told me that he really hadn't really wanted to get married, to really get into, household life and the whole situation. But he felt he needed that sort of situation. And he felt the ladies from that part of the world were in many ways quite like Indian ladies, very pious, very chaste, very faithful. And therefore he thought it would be okay to get married to one of them and to her, rather than to a Westerner who he felt were a little, I don't know what to say, wilder or something, not so self-controlled. And he told me that he would speak to me about it from just on a few occasions, actually. And I remember he told me one time that his wife was very chaste, very faithful, and she would never get angry with him. She was always, respectful. But he said whenever she would get upset, he would know, because she would not speak to him much at all for a little while. And then he'd understand that something was wrong and he needed to speak to her and try and sort it out. So anyway, but like that, like I said, he was not inclined to like the full-on grihasta ashram, in-depth family, children type of situation. And therefore, after some time, he developed the idea to take sannyas. And indeed, he did take sannyas, of course. And as a sannyasi, he was very, very sincere and very serious preacher of Krishna consciousness. Of course, for a sannyasi, the main thing is to be a preacher, and he really got into it. He particularly liked to preach Bhagavad Gita. And I'm sure many of you are aware that he produced the Gita Amrita sort of CD or whatever presentation. Such a beautiful presentation. Really, really. So first class and so interesting and so extremely nicely done, based on Prabhupada's instructions, but in very tasteful ways, including certain things from our previous acharyas. He gave me one, and I've listened to that a number of times. So, yeah, he was very studious. He was very, very dedicated to Prabhupada. Of course, he was first initiated by Srila Prabhupada, second initiated by His Holiness Tamal Krishna Goswami. But we discussed their relationship on a few occasions, and as far as he was concerned within his heart, he was a disciple of Srila Prabhupada, and his relationship with Tamal Krishna Goswami was nice, but it was not at all on the level of his relationship with Srila Prabhupada. So then he became a guru at some point, and we never really discussed about his disciples, how many, or so actually I don't even know how many. I do know a few, a handful, 2 or 3 maybe, and they're very, very sincere devotees. Actually more than 2 or 3, probably 4 or 5. They're very sincere devotees, very dedicated to serving him, upholding his standards, and they really keep him within their hearts. So then after some time, of course, we all heard that he had hepatitis C. As I understand, that was the condition. And for reasons best known to himself, he decided to take some very aggressive treatment in some, where was it? Bosnia, or I don't even know where, but down in the Balkans somewhere. And I was not happy about that. And even I discussed it a bit with Niranjan Maharaj, who, the two of us, we knew Purnachandra Maharaj very, very well. And when we were not happy about it. And, what can we say? Of course, Krishna's in control, and I'm sure Maharaj has gone back to Krishna. But how I wish that some other approach had been taken with that disease. And even though it probably would have shortened his life, but at least we could have had his association for a number of years more. So these are some thoughts of my association with Purnachandra Maharaj. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to remember him and speak about him. Hare Krishna, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, His Holiness Purnachandra Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. I've been asked by disciples of His Holiness Purnachandra Goswami Maharaj to speak about him as the commemoration of his disappearance from this world is just coming up. I'm very happy to do so, to purify myself by remembering a great Vaishnava. It's a short notice, and I didn't have extensive association with him, so I won't be saying that much, although we did share some good times together, and we were just getting to know each other more and more. But then he passed away from this world. He was based in England for quite some time, but only after I had left there. He's born in America, and he was on, as far as I remember, he was on the Radha Damodar party, famous in the early to mid-1970s. And like pretty much all the devotees I know, or many of them who were on that party, he always had a great sense of respect and gratefulness for His Holiness Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj, who was the driving force behind the massive efflorescence of book distribution in America that was occasioned through the Radha Damodar traveling Sankirtan party. He was in England, and he came to England. I was born in England this time round, and I left England fairly soon after joining to come to India and subsequently spend time in Bangladesh and other countries. But then starting from 1986, I started to come to the West regularly, including brief stops in England. And I used to see him there. Two things I remember, about two things in particular I remember about seeing him in England. Two incidents, you could say. One was at Bhaktivedanta Manor, just outside London. I was in the guest room, or what's it called, the Prabhupada Disciples Room. Looking out, I just looked out on the lawn there, and he was sitting there, giving a class to 3 or 4 devotees, and then he was just talking with them on and on. I believe he had a scheduled time, but then afterwards he was just going on talking and talking to them. Of course, I was at a distance, I couldn't hear what he was saying, but I was struck by the fact that even though he was known as an accomplished preacher, and then he had many devotees who were interested to associate with him, but he was quite happy to give what we call quality time, hours and hours, to just 1 or 2 individuals. The group was 4 or 5, and then it reduced to 1 or 2, and then he was just personally talking to them. So that struck me, that he dealt with, he was prepared to give himself to individuals. Another, and this might have come before that, I can't remember the chronology, and it doesn't matter that much, was at Soho Street Temple, where I came in. He'd already started giving his talk. It was the morning talk on Balaram's appearance day, Balaram Purnima. And it was a superb talk. And I got to know, as I listened to more of his talks, that all his talks were superb. They're very, very deeply researched, with all quotes from so many different shastras and comments of previous acharyas. I was very impressed with it, and I got a recording of it after that talk, so I could hear the beginning also. And then I got the idea, well, there's so much in here, you could make a whole book out of it. So, taking his permission, I got that transcribed, and then I started work, expanding it a bit, adding a few things, and making it into a book on Balaram. That book on Balaram has been in the womb for a long time, and still hasn't come out. Looking forward to it when it comes. But then I myself, at the request of disciples in Croatia, started to hold an annual festival in Croatia, and especially for my disciples, and others would come also, because I had disciples from around the country. And then we used to invite guest speakers also. And one time he came, and we wanted other times he would come also. Actually, I met him at a festival before that in Croatia. That was organized by ISKCON Zagreb at the time, at some campsite inland, before they started doing it on the coast, with some lake there. I believe it was, I don't know, memory is a strange thing. I remember one time we got into discussing, and the Rupa Goswami's verse that we find in Chaitanya Charitamrita that explains the Yakomara Hara verse that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu mysteriously recited at Rath Yatra, and then Rupa Goswami made verse to explain that and how this all unfolds as the Rath Yatra. And so that was a nice discussion. Yeah, and in Lika, that was in Croatia where we had my disciples festival. Naturally, some of his disciples came also, and I'm very impressed by his presentation of Shastra. He's very learned, very thorough in his presentations, very sober, and there's no showmanship there. Very thoughtful. He wasn't just repeating, but he blended it together. He contemplated it also. And at the same time, while bringing in so many points from previous acharyas, at the same time very faithful to Srila Prabhupada and Srila Prabhupada's style of presentation, not presenting it in some kind of way that sometimes we see devotees who give talks from higher or high-level topics, but he was very cautious not to publicly venture into areas that Srila Prabhupada cautioned us not to discuss publicly. And he also didn't come off like, I'm giving you all the highest things and I'm the savior of ISKCON or any such thing. It was his relishing of the pastimes of Krishna and the tattva, the philosophical understandings concerning Krishna. He was relishing that and sharing that. Just one little incident is a funny thing. In Croatia, at that Lika camp, because I used to put eye drops, water-based eye drops. He saw me doing that once. I was just about to go and give a class. And he said, oh, you're putting in some artificial tears. You must have learned it from the Sahajiyas in Bangladesh. He's joking, of course. I said, no, they don't do that. They use chili powder. The real serious ones who want to get lots of tears, they use chili powder. I know, just a little touch of it, otherwise it wouldn't just be, it would be torrents of tears if you used more than 1 or 2 grains of chili powder. So that was a little joking exchange. In Russia, I saw him maybe a few times there at different festivals. He spent time learning Russian because he wanted to interact with the Russian devotees without having to go through a translator. He spent about 1 year of his life, of course, not ceasing to do activities of Krishna consciousness or giving talks or any such thing, but he would go every day for Russian, learning Russian, living in Moscow, I believe it was. And he was at the point where he would talk with the devotees. He would interact with them. Very peaceful by nature. And once then, somehow in conversation, he told me he's from New York City. I was surprised. You're from New York? I was surprised because we generally think of New Yorkers as being very sharp, not peaceful. Not that they don't have they have very good qualities for getting things done in the world. So many of our leaders of the Krishna conscious movement came from New York City, but we generally don't think of them as being very peaceful personalities. So I was surprised, and he said, yeah, it's possible to change, which suggests that he was previously quite passionate, you might say also. He was very peaceful. In the sense that he creates a peaceful kind of atmosphere around him. There are some devotees like that. Krishna Kshetra Maharaj is like that also. He's so peaceful that he creates peacefulness around himself. He just cools everyone down when he comes in any place. Purnichandra Maharaj was that rare kind of person who pretty much everyone likes. Ajata Shatru. It's hard to find anyone who didn't like him, or who was inimical toward him. He wasn't only soft-spoken, he was also outspoken. He wasn't afraid to speak out. In fact, he made a whole book, the title of which I don't remember, Hidden Obstacles on the Path of Devotional Service, something like that, in which he frankly discusses various syndromes within the Krishna consciousness movement that he had observed, and wasn't hard to observe, but sometimes you need someone to point out things. Things like devotees equating leadership positions within the movement with spiritual advancement, and exploiting devotees by leaders, and using the spiritual principle of surrender to get devotees to kowtow to your will, and to stifle their spiritual progress. And one of the points he made in that small book was that Srila Prabhupada wanted disciples who are independently thoughtful, but that is often stifled by leaders or managers who want followers who are not independently thoughtful, because they're troublesome. So in that sense, there were some who were not so happy with him, but his personality was that he pointed out problems without pointing fingers at individuals. His New York background, I guess that made him very down to earth also. That's one thing. He was a guru within a movement, sannyasi and guru. He took sannyas just shortly before he left this world. But even before he started accepting disciples formally, he was clearly a spiritual leader, in as much as he gave spiritual guidance. And he wasn't the type who was going to go out and storm the world and initiate left, right, and center. He always kept a somewhat low profile, but his own qualities, he was recognized. Just another couple of incidents from Russia. I remember, one time in Mangalarti in the South Russia camp, there were very few devotees in Mangalarti, about maybe around 100 or less than 100, which isn't many when there are about 4,000 attendees at the festival. Maybe that was the last time I went to such festivals, because they often go on late at night and then no one, including leaders, turn up for Mangalarti. But I think he was there and I was there, out of all the leaders. Maybe there were others also, but I was leading the kirtan, and I was trying to lead as I usually, when I lead Mangalarti kirtan, I usually start off slow and then gradually speed up. But the devotees, they couldn't follow slow. All they could do was sing fast, and I was trying to slow them down. After I tried a few times, he just quietly leaned over to me and said, "Look, if they can't follow, why don't you go along with them?" And so I acquiesced with his advice. And then I believe the last time I saw him was in Moscow, and I went in to see him. It was early morning. I can't remember why I did. It was during Japa period. I don't usually talk with others at that time. Maybe I was leaving. And he was sitting alone in the room that had been allocated to him, with everything dark and just a candle burning, that's all. Of course, he could have put the light on, but he liked to chant, and just enough light to see things if you need to see things. Otherwise, just enough light and very, very soft light. And then we spoke a little bit, and I believe at that time he said he was going to go for treatment and this and that, and he might pass away, and didn't seem to be disturbed by that at all. Just one more thing I should mention, and anyone who knows Purnachandra Maharaj at all will know this very well. He also had great love for kirtan and led very lively kirtans. No, not very lively in the sense that the pounding and this and that, but happy kirtans, very expert mridanga player. And one thing I remember also about him is he smiled a lot, smiled and laughed, not uproarious laughter, but he's always open to crack a joke, to share jokes. He left this world young. Such is the will of Krishna. We can't understand. Hare Krishna. That's all I remember for now. There was, I'm sure many devotees remembering him will say they lost a friend, but not lost, because we're all eternally related in the service of Krishna. Particularly he and I and so many others are eternally related at the lotus feet of His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. And we enter this world, we leave this world, and ultimately we all have to join in Krishna's world, which he spoke about and directed us toward. So thank you to him, and thank you for his disciples who asked me to speak about him. Hare Krishna. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha Kripa sindhubhyacha Patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.